Teo's hands were tired. His back hurt. His eyes felt heavy from too many sleepless nights, and the scar on his left shoulder throbbed with a dull pain that never quite went away. He had been hauling cargo between the colonies for 7 years now, and every single day felt like the one before it. The ships never changed. The routes never changed. The loneliness never changed. The space station hung above the planet Kepler 442b like a rusted machine. It was old, built by humans 50 years ago when they first started exploring beyond Earth. The station had grown over time with additions that didn't quite match the original structure, creating a messy, interesting look that somehow felt more real than the perfect, clean stations built by the other species. Murphy's Starport Tavern was located in the oldest section of the station, in a part where the metal walls still showed the orange color of age and rust. The neon sign outside flickered with a blue and green glow that made the whole building look like it belonged in an old Earth movie. Teo had been coming to this bar for 5 years. It was his place, not because it was nice or clean, but because it reminded him that humans were still here, still building things, still trying to make a life among the stars. He pushed the door open, and warm air hit his face. The bar was crowded tonight, which was unusual. Teo immediately knew something was different. The mix of people, or rather, creatures, was all wrong. He could see the tall, crystalline forms of the Valorians sitting at a corner table, their transparent bodies glowing softly with an internal light. They were the ones who thought everything. The ones who knew everything, or at least they believed they did. Next to the Valorians sat the Vicari. These creatures looked like insects mixed with machines. Their exoskeletons were hard and shiny, colored in deep purples and blues. They had too many limbs, and their movements were sharp and precise. The Vicari were known for following rules. They followed them so carefully, so exactly, that sometimes people wondered if they knew how to do anything else. The Vicari leader was tall, even for his kind. His exoskeleton had patterns on it that showed rank and achievement. His name was Skrivoth, though Teo only knew this from overhearing conversations. Skrivoth was laughing, a sound like sharp metal being dragged across concrete. He was laughing at someone. Teo's heart sank when he recognized who Jiwan. Jiwan was a good man. He worked as a cargo attendant at the station, moving containers and packages for different traders. He was gentle, kind to everyone he met, and he loved to tell jokes. Teo had met him years ago when they both worked on the same colony ship. They had been friends ever since. But right now, Jiwan was being humiliated. "You see," Skrivoth was saying, his many limbs gesturing wildly, "this is what evolution looks like when it fails. The human species. You are creatures of accidents and mistakes. Your biology is weak. Your minds are limited. You reproduce too quickly, think too slowly, and your lifespan is barely worth measuring." The other Vicari around him made sharp clicking sounds. They were laughing. Jiwan's face was red and his fists were clenched, but he was not fighting back. He was just standing there, taking it. One of the Valorians leaned forward slightly. When Valorians moved, it looked strange because their crystalline bodies caught the light in odd ways. "Our latest assessment confirms this analysis," the Valorian said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "Humanity represents a species with interesting potential, but ultimately unremarkable achievements. They are, in our comprehensive analysis, a species that will plateau before reaching true advancement." Teo ordered a drink and tried to ignore what was happening. He really tried. He sat at the bar and stared into his glass, watching the amber liquid swirl inside. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He told himself he should just finish his drink and leave. He told himself that arguing with beings who thought they were superior was pointless. But something inside him was breaking. For 7 years he had watched. He had watched the humans in the colonies work harder than any other species. He had watched them build cities on barren rocks. He had watched them pull each other up when things fell apart. He had watched them laugh and love and create beauty out of nothing. And every single day, the galaxy told them they didn't matter. The galaxy told them they were mistakes. The galaxy told them they should be grateful for whatever scraps the older, smarter species allowed them to have. The Vicari leader walked over to Jiwan, who was still standing in the middle of the bar. He was much taller than Jiwan, and the difference in size made the humiliation worse somehow. "Tell me," Skrivoth said, bending down to look directly into Jiwan's eyes. "What is your purpose? What have your kind achieved that is worth noting? What makes you believe you belong in this galaxy at all?" Jiwan looked away. His jaw was tight. "I am waiting," Skrivoth said. "Surely the evolutionary mistake can speak for itself." That's when Teo stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the metal floor, and the sound cut through all the conversations in the bar. Everyone stopped talking and turned to look at him. The Valorians paused their observation. The Vicari stopped their clicking laughter. Even the other humans in the bar turned to see what was happening. Teo was not an impressive figure. He was of medium height, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that showed every year of his difficult life. He was not a fighter by training. He was not a warrior or a soldier. He was just a man who hauled cargo for a living. But as he walked across the bar toward Skrivoth and Jiwan, something in him had shifted. Something had broken open inside him that had been held together by patience and resignation for far too long. He did not speak. He did not make a speech or announce his intentions. He simply walked up to Skrivoth, looked the alien creature directly in its multiple eyes, and threw a punch. The impact was not as powerful as it might have been. Teo was tired and his form was not perfect. But the punch connected squarely with Skrivoth's mouthparts, and the sound of it echoed through the entire bar. For a moment, nothing happened. Skrivoth stood there, and Teo stood there, and the entire bar held its breath. Then Skrivoth took a step backward. A thin line of fluid ran down his exoskeleton where Teo's punch had cracked the surface. It was just a small crack, barely visible, but it was real. The Vicari had been struck by a human, by the thing they considered a mistake. And everything changed in that instant. Everything was about to become very different. The silence that followed was strange. It was the kind of silence that happens right before something really big occurs. In the entire bar, no one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. The Vicari looked at their leader with confusion written across their features. The Valorian's crystalline forms stopped glowing for a moment, as if they were processing something that their systems could not quite understand. Skrivoth was the first to move. He raised one of his 4 arms, and Teo prepared himself for what was coming. But he was not afraid anymore. Somehow, punching the Vicari had cleared something inside him, like fog lifting off water. He was ready. He was tired of being told that humans were less than. He was tired of watching his people be treated like children or pets. He was ready to fight. Skrivoth's arm came down fast, much faster than a human could move. But Teo was not the only human in the bar who was tired of being treated badly. Jiwan moved, stepping forward and pushing Skrivoth slightly off balance. It was not a strong push, but it was enough to throw off the timing of the Vicari's attack. Skrivoth's strike missed Teo and hit the bar instead, breaking a wooden shelf and scattering bottles across the floor. This was when everything exploded into action. "Hey, Sue!" A salvage pilot who had been drinking alone near the back of the bar jumped up from his seat. He was a tall man with scars on his face from years of working in dangerous places. He moved quickly and grabbed another Vicari from behind, holding his arms down. Minna, an engineer who worked on starship repairs, ran across the bar and knocked over a table, using it as a barrier between herself and 2 more Vicari creatures. The fight became wild and unorganized. The Vicari were stronger and faster than humans. Their exoskeletons protected them from punches that would have seriously hurt a person. But they were also few in number, only 6 of them in total, while humans filled the bar. More importantly, the humans had something the Vicari did not have. Humans had desperation. They had years of being told they did not matter. They had experienced thousands of small humiliations. They had swallowed their pride over and over again, while beings like the Vicari looked down on them. And now, all of that was pouring out like a river breaking through a dam. Teo found himself fighting not just with his body, but with something deeper. His fists were part of it, but his whole being was involved. When a Vicari threw him against a wall, he pushed back harder. When another tried to grab his arm, he twisted away and struck back. He was hurt, and his body screamed at him to stop, but he would not stop. He could not stop. Jiwan was still in the fight, moving with a kind of grace that Teo had never seen before. He was not trained in combat, but he was clever. When a Vicari came at him, he would move just slightly, making the creature miss. And then he would strike at the weak points, the joints, the areas where the exoskeleton was thinner. He was fighting like someone who had learned to survive in a galaxy that was not kind to humans. Heisu proved to be more experienced than Tayo had expected. He moved like someone who had fought before, perhaps many times. He knew how to protect himself, how to read the movements of his opponent, and how to strike with purpose. The Vicari he faced was large and strong, but Heisu was smarter and more prepared. Minna had found a piece of metal from the broken table, and she used it as a tool rather than a weapon. She understood physics and leverage, and she used these things to her advantage. Every move she made was calculated. Every strike was placed exactly where it would do the most good. The Valorians did not move. They simply watched, their crystalline bodies still glowing with soft light. They observed the chaos with the detached interest of beings who were above such things. They did not try to stop the fight. They did not try to help the Vicari. They simply watched and made mental notes about what they were seeing. One of the Vicari was thrown hard against the bar. His exoskeleton cracked in several places, and he did not get up again. Another fell backward through a table, breaking it into pieces. The Vicari called out to each other with sharp, clicking sounds, communicating in their language, calling for a retreat. Skrivoth, the leader, looked at his companions. He looked at his damaged exoskeleton. He looked at the humans still standing, still ready to fight, despite their injuries. He looked at the Valorians watching from the corner with what might have been curiosity. Then he did something unexpected. He moved toward the door, and his remaining companions followed him. It was not a complete defeat, because Skrivoth had not been beaten down. It was more of a tactical withdrawal, but it felt like a victory to everyone in the bar. The humans stood there, breathing hard, blood running down their faces from various cuts and bruises. Teo felt like his entire body was on fire. His knuckles were split open. His side hurt where he had been struck. But he was standing. He was still standing. Jiwan looked at him with something like gratitude mixed with disbelief. Heisu was checking his arm to see if anything was broken. Minna had sat down on a stool and was breathing heavily, but she was smiling a strange smile, as if she had just experienced something that could not be explained in words. "What have you humans done?" one of the Valorians said from the corner. The voice sounded like wind chimes again, but this time there was something different in it. Not quite admiration, but perhaps something closer to confusion. "You have behaved in a manner that defies our calculations. You fought against creatures that were physically superior. You knew the probability of victory was extremely low. And yet you continued. Why?" Teo turned to look at the Valorian. His breathing was still fast and hard. His mind was still full of the rush of the fight. But he answered anyway. "Because some things matter more than math," he said. "Some things matter more than winning or losing. My friend was being hurt. That matters. My people were being insulted. That matters. We fought because we had to. not because we thought we would win." The Valorian was silent for a long moment. Then it said something that would change everything that came after. "This is unexpected," the Valorian said slowly. "We will need to reconsider our analysis of humanity. What we have just witnessed contradicts several of our fundamental assumptions about your species." In that moment, in a broken bar on a space station above a distant planet, the galaxy's opinion of humanity began to shift. The days that followed the bar fight were strange and confusing for everyone involved. The station's administrators came to investigate what had happened. They asked many questions. They looked at the broken furniture and the damaged walls. They listened to descriptions of the fight from both the humans and the few Vakari who remained on the station. The Vakari filed an official complaint with the Unified Galactic Council. They claimed that humans had attacked them without provocation. They demanded that the human workers on the station be punished. They wanted compensation for the damages done to their exoskeletons and their pride. But something unusual happened. The Valorians, who had been observers at Murphy's Tavern that night, submitted their own report to the council. They described the fight in detail. They did not take sides. They simply stated what they had seen. They explained how the humans had fought despite terrible odds. They noted that the humans had shown qualities that previous Valorian analysis had overlooked. One Valorian in particular wrote a special note. Her name was Kara, and she was different from the other Valorians in ways that even she did not fully understand. While her species communicated primarily through quantum entanglement, sharing information at speeds that could not be measured in conventional time, Kara had always been interested in actual physical presence. She spent time observing things rather than just analyzing data. She watched the humans in the bar, and she watched them recover from their injuries in the following days. Kara decided to do something that no Valorian had ever done before. She decided to leave her delegation and spend time in the human colony on the station. The first human she spoke to was Teo. She found him in the cargo bay where he worked, loading containers onto a transport ship. She approached him in her usual way, which was to simply appear and begin asking questions. Her crystalline form caught the lights in the cargo bay, creating strange reflections on the metal walls. "Explain," Kara said simply. "Why did you continue fighting when victory was impossible?" Teo stopped what he was doing. He turned to look at the Valorian. He had never actually spoken directly with one of her kind before. It was strange to see her this close. Her body was transparent, and he could see something glowing inside her. It was beautiful in an alien way. "I don't know how to explain it," Teo said slowly. I couldn't stop. My friend was being hurt. I couldn't just stand there and let it happen." Kara moved closer. "Your friend. This concept, friend. Explain this. From a pure logic perspective, one individual human has very limited value in a galaxy of billions of sentient creatures. Why would you risk yourself for so little?" Teo put down the container he was holding. "Because that little thing is everything to me," he said. "Because friendship is not about logic. It is about connection. It is about knowing that someone else matters to you and you matter to them. It is about not being alone." Kara processed this information. For a being who could communicate and think at quantum speeds, this was a strangely long process. "Not being alone," she repeated. "You fear isolation." "No," Teo said. "It is not just about fear. It is about love, I guess. About caring for other people because you choose to, not because it makes sense." Over the following weeks, Kara spent more and more time with the humans. She visited Jiwon at his work. She watched as he organized his tasks, not in the most efficient way, but in a way that made his co-workers happy and made them smile. She observed Minna solving engineering problems and saw how the engineer did not just find the correct answer but explained it to other humans so they could learn and improve themselves. She sat with Hei Su as he told stories about his adventures. and she began to understand that humans used stories not to transmit information, but to connect with each other emotionally. The Valorian collective began to notice that Kara was changing. Her reports became less about data and more about interpretation. She started using words that Valorians did not typically use, like beautiful and inspiring and meaningful. The collective became concerned. They sent her messages asking her to return to her usual methods of analysis. But Kara refused. She sent back a message explaining that the usual methods were incomplete. She said that the Valorians had been measuring humanity by wrong standards. They had been looking for technology advancement and intellectual capability. They had missed what was actually important about humans. Humans are valuable, Kara wrote. Not because they solve problems like we do, but because they inspire each other to try. They create art that has no practical purpose, but brings joy. They form bonds that make them stronger together than they are separately. They have something we have lost. They have heart. The Valorian collective did not understand. Kara's words seemed illogical and imprecise. But they also could not deny what their own observers had seen in Murphy's Tavern. They could not deny the data, so they decided to watch Kara more carefully, and through her, to watch humans more carefully. Meanwhile, Teo and his companions had become something like celebrities on the station. Other humans looked at them differently now. They treated them with respect. Young humans began asking them about the fight, wanting to know how it felt to stand up against creatures that everyone had been told were superior. One evening, Teo was sitting with Jiwon, Haisu, and Mina in a smaller, quieter bar than Murphy's. They were drinking and talking about what had happened. Mina was laughing at something Haisu had said. "Do you realize what we did?" Mina asked. "We changed something. We actually changed how people see us." "We just fought back," Haisu said with a shrug. "No," Kara said. She had entered the bar and joined their table without invitation. None of the humans seemed to mind. In fact, they had begun to expect her presence. "You did more than fight back. You demonstrated something. You showed that humans have qualities that the Valorians had classified as illogical and therefore unimportant. You showed that those qualities might actually be more powerful than logic itself." "What do we do now?" Teo asked quietly. Kara turned her glowing form toward him. "Now," she said, "you tell the galaxy about it. You make them understand. You prepare humanity for a future where you are finally recognized for what you truly are." And somehow, in that quiet moment, all of them knew that she was right. The bar fight had started something that could not be stopped. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Within 3 months, news of the bar fight had spread across the entire human space. Radio signals carried the story from colony to colony, station to station. News organizations reported on the incident, and with each retelling, the story grew. Some versions made it sound bigger and more impressive than it really was. Other versions added drama and emotion. But the core truth remained the same. Humans had stood up to creatures they had been told were superior, and they had refused to back down. What made the story even more powerful was what happened next. The Valorian collective officially changed their xenological assessment of humanity. The change was not huge on paper. They moved humanity up a few categories. But the important thing was not the change in ranking. The important thing was the reason they gave for the change. The official statement from the Valorian collective read, "Previous analysis failed to account for intangible variables that do not fit into our standard measurement frameworks. These variables include, but are not limited to, group cohesion driven by emotional bonds, sacrifice for abstract concepts such as honor, and continued resistance despite logical evidence of failure. These qualities may represent a form of intelligence that is not measurable through conventional means." This single statement opened doors that had been closed before. Scientists from other species began to study humans with new interest. They wanted to understand what made humans different. How could a species that was physically weaker and intellectually less advanced than so many others continue to thrive and expand? The Vicari, embarrassed by their defeat and confused by the changing opinions of their allies, requested a meeting with Tai-O. The request came through official channels. Tai-O was shocked when station administrators told him that the Vicari delegation wanted to talk with him. He had assumed the Vicari would want revenge or would try to make his life difficult, but Scrivoth had different plans. The Vicari leader arranged for a formal negotiation. It would take place on neutral territory, a space station controlled by a third-party species that remained officially neutral in all galactic conflicts. Tai-O prepared for the meeting with help from G1 and the others. They discussed what he should say. They role-played different scenarios. They wanted to make sure Tai-O was ready for anything. Kara also participated in the preparation, offering her perspectives on how different species thought and what they valued. The Vicari respect strength, Kara explained, but they also respect something else. They respect direct action. They respect clear communication. They do not value subtlety or manipulation. When you meet with Scrivoth, be direct. Tell him the truth. The meeting took place in a large room on the neutral station. Tai-O entered alone, as was the custom for such negotiations. Scrivoth was waiting, along with two other Vicari advisors. The room was cold and formal, with nothing to suggest comfort or friendship. "Tai-O," Scrivoth said, his voice still like grinding metal but somehow more measured than before. "I have called you here to discuss what happened at Murphy's Tavern." Tai-O nodded, but did not speak immediately. He let Scrivoth continue. "My analysis of that event was incomplete," the Vicari leader said slowly. This seemed to be difficult for him to say. "I assessed your species based on physical and technological capability. In those measurements, humans are inferior. This is fact. But the Valorian report suggests that I measured the wrong things." "Yes," Tai-O said simply. Scrivoth made a clicking sound that might have been anger or might have been something else. "In my culture, when a being demonstrates unexpected strength, it demands respect. You demonstrated strength, not of the body, but of something else. The Valorians call it heart. The concept is unfamiliar to Vicari, but we understand the value of it." "What are you saying?" Tai-O asked. "I am saying," Scrivoth responded, "that the Vicari collective proposes a new treaty with humanity, not a treaty of subservience or control, a treaty between equals. The Valorians have begun to speak of humans with something approaching admiration. Perhaps we should as well." The meeting lasted for several hours. Tai-O discussed trade arrangements, resource sharing, and military cooperation. But more importantly, he discussed respect. By the time he left the meeting, a preliminary agreement had been reached. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. News of the new treaty spread quickly. Other species took notice. Some began to think about humanity differently. Some began to revisit their own assessment of humans. The Valorians organized a great conference at the Galactic Council to discuss the new understanding of human capabilities. Tai-O was invited to speak at the conference, along with Ji-Won, Hai-Su, and Min-Ah. They were to give testimony about what it meant to be human. Representatives from hundreds of species would be present. As Tai-O prepared for the conference, he thought about his life. He thought about all the years of feeling small and insignificant. He thought about all the times he had been treated as less than. He thought about that moment in Murphy's Tavern when everything had changed. He realized that he had never set out to be important. He had never wanted to change the galaxy. He had just wanted to defend his friend. He had just wanted to push back against people who treated him badly. He had wanted to refuse to accept that his people were mistakes, and somehow that simple act of resistance had created something huge, something that was spreading across the galaxy like light breaking through darkness. Minna found him the night before the conference. She sat down next to him with a cup of tea. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," Teo admitted. "Tomorrow, representatives of hundreds of species will be listening to me. Me, a cargo hauler. Someone nobody even noticed before." "That is exactly why they want to listen to you," Minna said. "You are real. You are not a diplomat or a politician. You are just a human who refused to accept being treated badly. That is powerful." She was right, Teo realized. Tomorrow, the entire perspective of the galaxy would change. It would change because one person had decided that some things mattered more than safety. Some things mattered more than logic. Some things mattered more than probability of success. All it had taken was one punch, one moment of refusal, and now everything was different. The Galactic Council Chamber was the most impressive building Teo had ever seen. It had been constructed over the course of 200 years by multiple species working together. The walls were made of materials that changed color and texture depending on the angle of the light. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow. The floor was covered with symbols and writing from hundreds of different languages and species. Teo stood at the center of the chamber, looking out at the assembled delegates. There were beings of all shapes and sizes. Some floated above the ground. Some were so small that they could fit in a human hand. Some were so large that they had to bend down to fit through the chamber's doors. All of them were waiting to hear what Teo would say. He felt very small in that moment, but he also felt something else. He felt important. He felt like what he had to say actually mattered. The supreme leader of the council, a being called Ventros, who came from a species that existed partially in multiple dimensions, raised one of its appendages to signal for silence. "We have gathered here," Ventros announced, "to hear testimony from representatives of the human species regarding recent events and the nature of human capability. These representatives have been requested to explain in their own words what they believe makes their species significant in our galactic community. We will listen now to Teo, who was central to the incident at Murphy's Tavern." Teo had prepared a speech. He had written it down and practiced it many times. But as he stood there in the chamber, facing hundreds of alien beings who had come to hear what he had to say, all his preparation seemed to disappear from his mind. He decided to speak from his heart instead. "I am not a politician," Teo began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I am not a scientist or a philosopher. I am just a human who hauls cargo between the colonies. For my entire life, I have heard that humans are not as good as other species. I have heard that we are not as smart, not as strong, not as advanced. I have heard that we should be grateful just to exist in a galaxy that belongs to better species than us." He paused and looked out at the assembly. "But that night in Murphy's Tavern, I realized something. I realized that the things you were measuring us by are not the most important things. You measure by technology and intelligence and physical strength. And yes, by those measures, we are not the best. But you are ignoring something. You are ignoring the things that make us truly human." Teo began to walk slowly across the chamber as he spoke. "You see, humans are not good at accepting that things are hopeless. We are not good at giving up. When we fought against the Vicari that night, we all knew we could lose. We all knew we might die or be seriously hurt. But we fought anyway because some things matter more than survival." "My friend matters more than survival. My people's dignity matters more than survival. Standing up for what is right matters more than survival." He stopped in the center of the chamber. "You are beings of pure logic," Teo said, looking directly at the Valorian delegation. "You calculate probabilities and make decisions based on data. This makes you efficient, this makes you powerful, but it also makes you limited. Because humans do not always follow probability. Humans follow their hearts sometimes. Humans follow their dreams. Humans follow their passions, and we do these things even when the odds say we will fail. Mina stepped forward then. She had been given permission to speak as well. I work with technology, Mina said. I understand machines and systems and physics. The Valorians suggested that humans are not good at innovation because we do not have the processing power that your species has. But you are wrong. Humans innovate not just because we have to. We innovate because we want to create beautiful things. We innovate because we want to solve problems for people we love. We innovate because we dream, and we cannot help but try to make those dreams real. Then Haisu spoke about human resilience. He told the story of how humans had survived on Earth, a planet that tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways. He described how humans had evolved not by becoming stronger, but by becoming more creative, more adaptable, more determined. Finally, Jiwon spoke about friendship and loyalty. He explained how humans formed bonds with each other that could not be explained through logic. He talked about how humans would do impossible things for people they cared about. He described love and family and community as forces that could not be measured but were more powerful than any technology. The chamber was silent when they finished speaking. All the assembled delegates seemed to be processing what they had heard. Kara, who had joined the human delegation, stepped forward. This was unusual. A Valorian speaking in defense of humans was something that had never happened before at the Galactic Council. As a member of the Valorian Collective, Kara said, I am speaking against the conclusions that my entire species has reached over the course of thousands of years. I am doing this because I have spent time with humans, and I have learned something that no amount of data analysis could have taught me. Humans are not incomplete versions of higher species. They are something different, something unique, and that uniqueness is a form of strength that we have lost. Kara's crystalline form seemed to glow more brightly as she spoke. The Valorians measure everything through calculation. We believe that the universe can be understood through mathematics and logic. And we were wrong. Or more accurately, we were incomplete. The universe cannot be fully understood without understanding why beings choose to do things that do not make logical sense, why they sacrifice for others, why they create beauty, why they form bonds that cannot be broken. These things are not primitive. These things are advanced forms of existence that we have forgotten how to appreciate. When Kara finished speaking, something changed in the chamber. The delegates began to talk among themselves. Some seemed confused. Some seemed to be reconsidering their previous positions. The Valorians were clearly having some kind of internal debate through their quantum communication system. Finally, Ventros raised its appendage again for silence. What we have heard today, Ventros said, requires us to reevaluate fundamental assumptions about intelligence and advancement. We have believed that progress means becoming more logical, more efficient, less driven by emotion. Perhaps we have been wrong about what progress truly means. Perhaps a truly advanced civilization is one that can balance logic with emotion, efficiency with purpose, calculation with dreams. Ventros turned to face Teo directly. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I propose that humanity be recognized not as a promising but primitive species, but as a species that possesses unique and valuable qualities that enrich our entire galactic community. I propose new treaties. I propose increased cooperation. I propose that humanity be granted full status as equals among the advanced species of this galaxy. The vote was called immediately. It was almost unanimous. Only a few dissenting species voted against the proposal, and even they did not vote to reject it. They simply abstained, choosing not to accept it, but not willing to oppose it. In that moment, everything changed for humanity. In that moment, humans went from being a species that was tolerated to being a species that was valued. All because of one punch thrown in a broken bar by a tired cargo hauler who refused to accept being treated badly. As Teo stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, hearing cheers and signals of approval from hundreds of different species, he thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. A few months ago, he was nobody. Nobody important. Nobody that mattered. Now he was standing at the center of history, watching an entire galaxy change its mind about his people.